Now, Honorable Minister's reply.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chairman, sir, first of all, let me welcome all the views of, I think, 19 honorable members have spoken today on the bill, and each one of them has expressed support for it. I welcome that, and I think it underlines really how much this bill is in our national interest. The main concerns, I think, have been shared by everybody, that today there are more Indian ships in waters, more Indian trade being done, more Indian crews, not only in our own ships but in other people's ships. And as Sudhanshu Trivedi ji pointed out, we had the case of MV Alandra Rainbow, where we could not successfully prosecute a case of piracy because we did not have a law. I think all honorable members also recognize that we have an obligation under UNCLOS, and that this has taken us 27 years to do, but better late than never. So this bill, I think, is timely. I think that is widely recognized. With your permission, sir, I would very quickly run through certain individual points which members had raised. I know some of them, for various reasons, are not with us right now. Mr. Vivek Tankhaji, first of all, brought up the issue that a reference to aircraft is not necessary. I just want to highlight, sir, that actually in section 2 bracket J bracket 2, there is a reference to seaplane and other aircraft, because ships do carry planes, and you can also have seaplane piracy. So the idea of an aircraft, I think Mahesh Jethmalani ji also raised that issue, is not entirely fanciful. I think that is a provision that we had to make. The second issue which he raised was, what is the procedure for restitution and forfeiture? I think it is very clear under section 7.2 of the bill that this is by court order. The third issue he raised was, how will you align death penalty, possible death penalty, rarest of rare cases, with countries where death penalty is outlawed? Now, typically what happens is, in such cases, if there is an extradition issue, and the country where death penalty is outlawed seeks from us an assurance that we will not impose death penalty, we will give such an assurance. So what we have done is, we have kept the provision. There could be occasions, none of us wants it, there could be occasions where the rarest of rare penalty may be invoked. So we have to make provision for it, but we have given the flexibility to the court, and we have also created both an extradition provision and a reciprocity provision, so that if that is a condition for extradition, we will naturally go with that. Then there was an issue of his concern about Article 7, whether it involved planning. Actually, Article 7 deals with suspicions where there is somebody engaged in piracy. So that is, I think, perhaps a slight misunderstanding there. Regarding designated courts, there are already designated courts in certain other cases, like the Prevention of Money Laundering Act and the National Investigating Agency Act, and these have been constituted in consultation with the Chief Justice. So we have followed exactly those precedents in this case. And his final point, which is, he said, if a ship is carrying ammunition, would you then assume that it is going to do a mala fide act? It's not just a question of carrying ammunition, sir. In fact, the provision here in Article 11 bracket A also says there is reasonable grounds. So just carriage of ammunition is not a crime. There has to be reasonable grounds, as well as there are two other provisions about evidence being there, on the basis of which there is a presumption of an offence likely to be committed. If I could move to Prakash Javadekar ji's views, sir. One, he explained very well why we need the law. He, I think, rightly highlighted the importance of the standing committee, its contribution here. I also appreciate that very deeply. Then Jawahar Sarkar ji asked whether this is applicable to only Indian ships. No, it is not. It is applicable to any ship in the jurisdiction where piracy is committed and where the authorized personnel from India have taken action. Now, as to who is authorized, I think the bill is very, very clear. So Section 2(1)(a) makes that very clear. He asked about other aircraft. I think Seacraft, there could be other aircraft also there. Who executes the provisions? I think, again, the bill is very clear. Only the authorized personnel can execute the provisions of the bill. So there is no concern out there. The jurisdiction, I think, has been laid out very clearly. And where the presumption issue, Article 11, is concerned, I want to highlight that the presumption is not an open-ended presumption. The presumption says very clearly that there should be arms, ammunition, explosives and other equipment recovered where there is reasonable ground to presume mala fide intent. There is evidence of use of force, threat or force, and there is evidence of an intended threat of using bombs, arms, firearms, etc. So the presumption is backed up by two sets of evidence and as also the fact that there are reasonable grounds to presume. He also asked how many cases of piracy there have been so far involving India. I have two sets of statistics. Between 2008 and 2011, there have been 27 incidents in which Indian crew members were involved. 288 Indian nationals were involved in these 27 incidents. Between 2014 and 2022, 155 Indian crew members were involved in 19 cases. The most serious case, of course, we had was in 2017 when we had an Indian ship called Al Khawzar, which had been pirated off the island of Socotra. This was a particularly difficult case for us, but this is to show, the numbers show why we need this bill so badly at this point of time. If I could move then to Shri Elangoji, he again inquired what is the procedure for forfeiture of property, and I think again the answer is very clearly this is done under court orders. Then there was a number of members raised this issue of Section 3, Section 4, Section 5, that somewhere there is overlapping, somewhere there is confusion. This will create problems possibly in courts. People said the grey area, even lawyers will benefit by this grey area. I think a lot of thought has been given, both by the standing committee and by the government, by the lawyers of the government, by the practitioners of prosecution and people who deal with shipping. We have, in each of these cases, clearly identified the key action and graded a punishment accordingly. So Article 3 is whoever commits an act of piracy. Article 4 is whoever attempts to commit an offence. And Article 5 is whoever participates, organizes and directs. So I would submit to you, Honorable Chairman, sir, that commits, attempts to commit, participates, organizes, director are all three different types of actions with a different level of gravity and therefore a different level of punishment if found guilty. There was the issue also about who will investigate this. I think it's very clear from the legislation intended, the bill proposed, that the police officer is the key person, and we will obviously assume that in such cases they have the competence to do that. In this regard, I think some members raised this issue, what should be the rank of a police officer? We have not specified it because we have gone by CRPC, where even a station house officer can file a case in such situations. So we have left it. There is already a pre-existing code and a criminal procedure. It is not for a legislation to necessarily add to that. I think we leave it to the general legislation. Then Dr. Shashmit Patra ji, of course, began by saying this is 75 years too late. I cannot disagree with him. I can only say that since we have come into government, we have tried to push this as strongly as we can. And the results of it we've seen because it is a widely recognized requirement. The 4-5 grey area which he had mentioned, I think I have answered. In terms of the designated courts, will there be long process of appeals? This bill cannot solve that problem. I mean, that is a problem which is part of a larger judicial issue. So I think what we can do is to set up a remedy in line with other similar legislation, and then we naturally keep hoping the judicial processes will move faster. Do we have jurisdiction on foreign ships? Was a question he asked. The answer is yes. The answer is, in our jurisdiction, if an act of piracy is committed, we have jurisdiction. And finally, the question he asked, is it 12 nautical miles? Is it 200 nautical miles? I will actually answer him, it is beyond that. That if you look at the provision is actually, high seas here includes the EEZ and all waters beyond the jurisdiction of any other state. So if any of our ships, and this is laid out in a further provision, if any of our ships actually find that there is an act of piracy committed and the authorized personnel have taken action there, then it becomes a jurisdiction of India. If I could move on, sir, to Shri Rami Reddy Allah, I think he made a very important point about coordination. One of the other honorable members mentioned that we have a fusion center. The fusion center in Gurugram is helping with the coordination. But we also, once we have our own legislation, it will help us to do more international cooperation, and I think that's a common point which all the members raised. Then, sir, Shri Tambidoreji raised two issues. One, he brought up the Tamil fishermen issue. I can understand his concern. It is a very legitimate concern. It is a matter to which Government of India has given the highest priority. We have worked very hard to ensure that these incidents which happen there are avoided. And when we have situations where our fishermen are detained, we have worked hard to get them released. So I understand the honorable member's concern. I want to tell him that Government of India is fully committed to ensuring that the interests of our fishermen are protected. But I do want to clarify, they are not treated as pirates. So there is really no relationship between the fishermen's issue in that sense and the bill under consideration. Then Shri G.K. Vasanji, having been Minister of Shipping before, brought up the issue of sailors and their families. I think it's a very legitimate issue wherever there is a detention. And sometimes, sir, they may not be detained by pirates. We have, for example, a ship right now which is detained in Nigeria, and many honorable members have taken up that case with us. We understand the plight of the people, the anxieties of the family. We have ensured full legal support in the case of that particular ship. But I think whether it is those instances or the Sri Lankan fishermen, I would like to assure all honorable members that the Government of India is completely and fully committed to the interests of its citizens. Then, sir, Shri Ravindra Kumar ji brought up a set of issues. One of them was whether death penalty would be accepted. And I have answered that many states do accept death penalty. Some states do not accept death penalty. No. I think we will look at that situation, but we have to make up our own mind. We cannot pass a legislation in this house because some other country has outlawed death penalty. We will pass whatever is the interests of India and the requirements of India. And in rarest of rare cases, death penalty is applied in this country. And that is the thought that has guided us in that regard. Then the issue came up on restitution and forfeiture. There is a difference. Restitution is provided if pirates are using a ship which they have captured. Forfeiture is the case if their own ship is involved in the process. Then I've answered the one on the rank of the police. The designated court which he had raised, I've given precedents where we have mentioned. On presumption, as I said, we are not looking at open-ended presumption. There has to be evidence, there has to be recoveries if that presumption is to be validated. And on the matter of jurisdiction, I think the bill is very, very clear. Ami Yagnik ji, I think, brought up the issue of a domestic follow-up, which is a very valid point. And more than that, international cooperation. I think she is absolutely right. Ultimately, if the numbers today have come down, sir, if you can see from the numbers which I have given, those numbers have come down because international cooperation has got stronger. And we can be more credible as an international partner if we have a law. And that is why today's consideration of this bill will strengthen our credentials as a partner with other countries to make sure that the world is more piracy-free. She also mentioned the issue of who will man the courts. This survey is left to the advice of the Chief Justice concerned. When we set up the designated courts, it will be done in consultation with the Chief Justice, and we have no doubt that the Chief Justice will make the appropriate decision in that regard. Then Mahesh Chetmalani ji made some very valid points about it being our international obligations and the large number of Indian crews and the possibility that piracy will shift closer to the Indian Ocean. Regarding jurisdiction also, I think it was important that he recognized that our jurisdiction is wherever our authorized personnel have taken action. I have clarified the point both about the aircraft as well about the gradation of offense and therefore of punishment. Then, sir, Shri B.K. Bhattacharya ji brought up the issue, of course, of death penalty. He was strongly against it. It is his privilege to have that view. But there are others who, including some honorable members, who have a view that a provision for a death penalty is a deterrent, and certainly is a deterrent against causing death. So that is also a point of view. And on the designated courts which he raised, again, my answer is the Chief Justice will be consulted. Fauzia Khan ji raised the issue of developing the skills to enforce this bill when it becomes law. I think that's a very valid point. It is also a point which other members had made in the other house. So our expectation is, whether it is shipping or whether it is Navy or the Coast Guard, once this bill is passed, they will be actually, in a sense, training their people, and once the designated courts are set up, then I think if there's any prosecution involved, we expect this to be addressed in a very professional manner. Then, sir, I would particularly like to thank Sudhanshu Trivedi ji for some of his remarks, particularly his highlighting both the Alandra Rainbow case as well as the fact that 11% of seafarers in the world today are Indian. So we are not only protecting Indian ships, any ship under attack anywhere in the world from pirates is probably going to have some Indian crew. So it is for us today a global problem. It's also an interesting point he made that ships come to India for shipbreaking, and that is also an industry that we have to protect through strong anti-piracy laws. Then, sir, Shri Ramji referred to the Italian Marines case. I think that's now behind us, but it is precisely to have legal clarity that we need legislation of the kind that we have submitted. GVL Narasimha Rao ji pointed out that the fact that Prime Minister chaired the Security Council meeting on maritime security, it was for the first time. That sent a very strong message about our seriousness in this domain. And I think that seriousness will be taken by the world at face value when we actually pass legislation like this. Otherwise, it would look as though we are saying things, but we do not have the laws to back it up. So I think his connecting the two is a very, very important insight. Santosh Kumar ji made 2 points which are beyond the remit, I think, sir, with your permission, I would say, of this debate, whether we should have online FIRs and whether capital punishment is appropriate or not. That is not a subject for today's discussion, but I do not share his view that Section 15 is ambiguous and there is scope for misuse. I think if you look at the authorized personnel, They are very professional people. We are talking of the Navy, you are talking of the Coast Guard, you are talking of officers of the state government or the central government who are specializing in this. I think we should have faith in our forces, not just on this issue. I think we should generally have faith in our forces. So I think his apprehensions there perhaps are not justified. Then Nazir Hussain ji asked me, saying, does this apply to EEZ? Yes, it applies to EEZ. It applies from the moment you leave India outwards through our waters, through EEZ, beyond EEZ, and any place where our authorized personnel legitimately make a detention. His points about coordination and SOPs are very well taken. I would like to inform the honorable members. Actually, there are already SOPs of the Navy, of the Coast Guard, and of the Ministry of Shipping. But the SOPs lack a legislative umbrella. So once we give this umbrella, I think the SOPs which they have done would be strengthened. But I think his point is very well taken, because it is finally the SOPs which will enforce these laws and make them effective. I would like to assure the honorable members, sir, through you, that where fishermen are concerned, we have two broad issues of concern. Tamil fishermen who are detained in Sri Lanka, often by Sri Lanka, or fishermen from Tamil Nadu who are detained there. Sometimes it could be from Puducherry or other states, and those from Gujarat who tend to be detained by Pakistanis. So these are our two big concerns, but they are both concerns very much on our mind, and we continuously work where to avoid incidents and where they are detained to get them released. If I could then, sir, finally come to Shri General Vatsya. I appreciate the fact that he has recognized that authorized personnel need to be protected, need to be given immunity. That is certainly our obligation as a state in ensuring that our forces are properly equipped to do their duty. That, sir, I hope clarifies the issues raised by all the parties.
Thank you.